Hi, everybody. This is Miss Sanders, and I'm reading Chapter 5 At Home with the Brisbanes. It's a foggy morning in the swamp. On most mornings, you can see everything clearly: the slithering snakes, the soaring birds, the insects darting and swooping. But in the fog, nothing is clear. All I can see are shadows. But I don't know what they are. I hope the fog clears soon because I'm getting hungry. I come out of the fog when Miss Brisbane begins lessons. I'm not sure I understand what she's talking about. Nouns, verbs, adjectives? What kind of animals are those? The thought of being chased by an adverb frightens me. There are lots of things I don't understand. Why does Tabitha seem so sad and lonely, yet she acts so rude when someone is friendly? And why on earth do students always giggle at Humphrey's annoying antics? I feel as useless as a toothless alligator. In the swamp, I could hop to it and get things done. I'd grab a cricket with my tongue, challenge Jumping Jack to a hopping contest, or discover a new puddle to soak in. Here, I watch things happen, but I can't do anything to change them. Late in the afternoon, Tabitha comes over to my tank. I hope she won't be rude to me. I think Heidi is being mean about you. I bet it's because you're new to room 26. Tabitha sighs softly. I'm new here too. It's hard to get used to. It's not like my old school. I know, I tell her. It's nothing like the swamp either. My loud boings make her smile. You probably don't even know what I'm saying, Tabitha tells me. I do a couple of hops and say, yes, I do. My boinging make her giggle. You're funny, Og, she says. Do it again. All right, I hop again because Tabitha has a nice smile. You understand me, but why do you always say boing? She asks. If I tried to explain, she wouldn't understand. I would like to understand why she keeps Smiley in her pocket. I don't think anyone in room 26 understands Tabitha, at least not yet. I don't think they really understand me either. I have a new foster home and a new mom, Tabitha tells me. She's nice, and Miss Brisbane is nice too, but I don't really feel like I belong here. Do you? I thought I did, I answered, but I'm confused too. Tabitha grins. I love talking to you, she says. And when you answer back, it's almost like you understand what I'm saying. I'm trying hard to understand a lot of things, but I wish she knew and realized how tough it is when so much has changed. After Tabitha returns to her seat, Humphrey starts squeaking nonstop. Is he jealous she talked to me? Or does he understand her problem too? I know he didn't come from a swamp, but he might have had another home before room 26. No matter how hard I listen, one squeak still sounds like another. I'm almost relieved when he stops squeaking and hops on that screeching wheel. There's so much about room 26 that is still foggy to this froggy. And when it's Friday again and Miss Brisbane says that Humphrey is going home with Miranda, I can tell Humphrey really likes her. He always scrambles to the front of his cage when she's nearby. I can tell that she likes him too. Whenever she looks at Humphrey, she smiles. She must enjoy squeaking more than I do. But when Miss Brisbane announces the news, Humphrey's squeaks sound worried. Luckily, before Miranda's dad comes to pick Humphrey and his cage up, Miranda tells him, "Don't worry, Humphrey. My dog won't be there to bother you." My furry little neighbor perks up. "Squeak," he says. Now he's happy. I guess he doesn't care for dogs. For such a tiny creature, he sure is complicated. At least I have a nice quiet weekend to look forward to, with no squeaking and no screechy wheels. But I'm surprised when Miss Brisbane comes up to my tank after school. Og, I worried about you all last weekend, so I'm taking you home with me this time. If she's worried about me, she must at least like me a little bit. That makes me feel as cozy as a lizard snoozing in a sunbeam. I could almost jump for joy. It seems strange to be riding in a car, especially with a blanket covering my tank. It reminds me of the bad day when I was frog-napped from the swamp. As I was carried away in a sack, I could hear the muffled boing, 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 boing of my friends calling me, "Come back." I hope they understand I didn't have a choice. There was a surprise waiting for me at Miss Brisbane's house. His name is Bert Brisbane, and he is her husband. Unlike most of the humans I've met, Mr. Brisbane doesn't walk around on two legs. Instead, he gets around in a chair with wheels. The way he rolls his chair in and out of doorways and around corners is very impressive. I try to imagine myself in a chair on wheels, but it would be strange for a frog not to leap once in a while. And an even bigger surprise is that from the moment Miss Brisbane carries my tank into the house, Mr. Brisbane is very interested in me. "A frog?" Mr. Brisbane leans in close to my tank. "Where on earth did you get a frog?" "I told you, Bert. Angie Loomis couldn't keep her in her room anymore. Keep him her room anymore. So I said I'd take him." Miss Brisbane tells her husband. "I thought it was just temporary," he says. "I'm glad it's not, since I never want to be near that bully bullfrog again." "His name is Og," she tells him. Mr. Brisbane smiles and nods. Og the frog. I like it. But what does my pal Humphrey think about him? His pal? My teacher's husband is friend with the little guy next door? "I'm not sure," his wife says. "I can't understand either of them." Then Mr. Brisbane turns toward my tank, looks me straight in the eye, and lets out a loud ribbit. I'm so surprised I hop back a few inches. Why do all humans think frogs say ribbit? He does it again in a very odd voice. Ribbit. "Bert, he doesn't understand you," Miss Brisbane tells him. "Why not?" her husband asks. "He's a frog, isn't he? And frogs say ribbit." "Not this frog," Miss Brisbane explains. She's right. I've never heard one of my fellow green frogs make such a silly sound. Not even a bullfrog. Mr. Brisbane leans in closer. Maybe he doesn't say anything at all, he suggests. I can't stand it any longer, so I tell him I have a lot to say. Mr. Brisbane jerks back a few inches when he hears my boing. He looks surprised. He looks as surprised as a flycatcher bird who's accidentally caught a bee. "What on earth was that?" he says. "It sounds like a broken guitar string." "That's the sound this type of green frog makes," she says proudly. The scientific name is Rana clamidens. I looked it up. Mr. Brisbane just stares at me. "Rana clamidens," he repeats. "But you can call me Og," I tell him. He bursts out laughing, and then do you know what? He lets out a very loud boing. He even makes it twangy like I do. "I think you two speak the same language," Miss Brisbane says with a laugh. "I only wish we did." As evening goes on, Mr. Brisbane continues to watch me closely. Thank goodness Miss Brisbane insists that he comes to the kitchen to eat dinner. Finally, I can relax. But as soon as they finish, Mr. Brisbane rolls back to my tank and watches me. What does he think this is? A television? I'm hoping the Brisbanes will watch television, especially a nature program set outdoors. I wouldn't even mind seeing a show about hamsters if it would help me figure out Humphrey. Mr. Brisbane's pal, Humphrey. All this attention makes me a little nervous, so I slide into my water dish and soak. I think it's boring to watch someone soak, but Mr. Brisbane seems to be fascinated. He's full of questions for Mrs. Brisbane, who pulls up a chair next to him. "Don't some frogs live in water all the time?" he asks. "There are all kinds of frogs, even frogs that lives in trees," she answers. "That's news to me." "If he had a bigger tank, would he swim around?" Mr. Brisbane suggests. I pop my head out of the water. "That's a great idea," I tell him. Mr. and Mrs. Brisbane both laugh at my loud boing boing. I'm still jumpy and jittery from all that staring, So I launch into my weekend workout to unwind. Hearty splashing, followed by a set of jumping jacks. I am surprised to see that the Brisbanes are impressed with my performance. Will you look at that? Miss Brisbane says. That is one lively frog, Mr. Brisbane replies. After that comes my froggy version of a push-up. Miss Brisbane gasps. I didn't know frogs could do that. I finished off with a series of big leaps. I can hardly believe my eyes, Miss Brisbane says when I stop. He's never behaved like that in class. I guess he wanted to put on a show for us, her husband replies. I can hardly believe how exhausted I am. If I were warm-blooded like humans, I would have broken out into a sweat. Amphibians like me don't sweat. While I'm resting, the Brisbanes talk about frogs. Miss Brisbane brings in several books, which they read together. Look, Miss Brisbane points to a page. Some frogs can jump over 20 times their own body length. I certainly think Og can, Miss Brisbane says. I'm glad she thinks so. Me, I'm not so sure. That reminds me of an old joke, her husband says. What do you get when you cross a frog and a bunny? I'm thinking the answer has something to do with hopping, so I'm surprised when he tells her a ribbit. I guess he's already got that green frog like me. I think he's already got that green frogs like me don't say ribbit. Still, it's as good as any of Kurt's jokes. Then he has another riddle. What did the bus driver say to the toad? Miss Brisbane shakes her head, and Bert replies, hop on. If Miss Brisbane had ever spent time with toads, he'd know I'm nothing like them. But I don't mind. He reminds me of one of my favorite swamp creatures, Uncle Chinwag. He is a kindly old green frog who tells stories, but also is a good listener. I learned a lot from Uncle Chinwag, like how to make my boings carry a whole mile and how to catch a tiny mosquito with my big tongue. He likes to tell jokes too. I especially like this one. What do you call an alien in the swamp? A Martian. I bet Mr. Brisbane would like that joke, but if I tried to tell him, he'd laugh at my boing, 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 boing. This frog is a treasure, Mr. Brisbane tells his wife. You should enter him in one of those frog jumping contests. They really have such things. I like the way he thinks. Of course, I've been in a many frog jumping contests in the swamp. Sometimes I even won. Miss Brisbane sighs. I like Og, but I have a problem with him. The words would give me a chill, but amphibians don't get chills. It's a cold-blooded thing again. But why on earth would she have a problem with me? Our class isn't anything like the swamp, she continues. Is he happy in his tank? I mean, Humphrey has always lived in a cage. That's different. That's the truth. That hamster is different as any creature I've known, including crickets and mosquitoes. I didn't understand Humphrey at first, she says, but he seemed happy. He seems so happy. He helped the students, and when I brought him home, he cheered you up. Mr. Brisbane nods. It was pretty hard to live after the accident that landed me here, as he pats his wheelchair. But Humphrey did help. Humphrey? Are they talking about the Humphrey I know? The annoying neighbor in the cage next door? He helps everyone, Miss Brisbane agrees. He really goes beyond his job as a classroom pet. Wait a second. Being a classroom pet is a job? I never thought of it before. If it were a real job, will I be the first classroom pet ever to be fired? Miss Brisbane rises. I'll make some tea. Mr. Brisbane follows. I'll get some cookies. And that's the end of chapter 5. Tune in tomorrow for chapter 6.